The world does not believe in heaven or hell or anything extra. I was talking to a man the other day, and he said that he was talking to a man that was a converted Muslim. He was converted to Muslim. And he lives among Jewish people down in L.A., and a lot of these people don't believe in really any other dimensions than what we live in. Heaven is in a different dimension where we live in it. But it's real. I'm going to tell you it's real. Hell is real. All right? And our messages from the Word of God, they should be real. They should be valid and something that we can prove. Okay? Now, something that I'm talking about today is it's credible. It talks about interdimensional travel. Interdimensional travel. We know that angels, spirits, go between dimensions and travel, and there are such things as angels and spirits. Now, the Jews that basically are in Israel are atheist Jews. They don't believe in the afterlife. They don't believe in spirits. They don't believe in angels or anything like that. My friend was telling me down in L.A., he said, those people don't believe anything. He said, they're very religious, but they don't believe in anything spiritual or afterlife. Now, I tried to put down my teacher, Dr. Carl E. Farah. And my grandfather teacher, Dr. J. Lewis Guthrie, used to talk about this all the time. J. Lewis Guthrie was a physicist, and he was one of the greatest language scholars and scientists of his day. On our website, through Brother Randall over there, he copied every bit of it, and he put in the creation of the heavens and the earth, the creations of the heavens and the earth. And Bill, you want to hand out some of them also?
Jim, we didn't have any long paper, so this is what Kim should give. This is all I could get.
Okay.
Can we hand it out?
Yeah, hand that one out. I'll get me back on camera here.
You quit me for my man, stay back. We can't beat that one up. We're going to try to get it all right for you. How you doing? How you doing?
Get the camera straightened back up here. All right.
I tried to get the whole thing, and then I had to get a picture.
All right.
Jim, I didn't get my paper on this, the other one.
Do what?
This here one.
All right. I try to. No, I can't leave the thing. A little interruption here in the midst of it. Anyway, people have trouble believing in heaven. They have trouble believing hell. They have trouble believing in afterlife. And I got down on paper here, and I'm going to read this to you. I don't know how to do it better. We live in a three-dimensional world. But there are at least 10 dimensions that scientists know about today. They are valid and real. Okay? They're valid and real. Now, we're going to do some time travel in just a few minutes because John was a time traveler. The Apostle John in the book of Revelation, we're going to go to Revelation 4 and 1, and we're going to take a trip beyond the dimension that he lived in. God took him through a different dimension. He was a time traveler. He completely jumped into the future. Okay? Now, from Revelation 1:1 through Revelation chapter 4, we have the church age. And then all of a sudden, we jump from the church age into heaven in chapter 4 and 5. We're going to go time travelers. We're going to be time travelers. We're going to go interdimensional. All right, the title of the message today is an dimensional journey, a trip to heaven. We can, in our three dimensions now, pay very close attention to this. We can move up and down, can't we? Any of you ever flown in an airplane? Okay. You have gone down, fallen on the floor? Anybody ever fallen down? Okay, we can go forward and we can go backward, can't we? This is what we call spatial. We understand this spatial world. This is called the brain world. The brain, B-R-A-N-E, the brain world. Something that we can experience. We can move forward and backward. We can move left and right. And these are the three spatial dimensions that we can experience in our daily lives. So our common sense tells us that there are three dimensions, because we can experience those three dimensions. Okay? This is a basic fact of nature. Stretching your arm forward, you can rotate your arm so that it points in any direction. See that? All of you can do that. You can point it backwards. You may move it around your body. When you're doing so, doing this little exercise, the clock is ticking. Now we go into a different dimension. Space and time. Space and time. Okay? Now, we can understand this brain dimension. We can understand energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Everything in the physical universe goes according, this is what we call Einstein's theory of relativity, okay? Is this going too far? E equals energy. Everything that you see has energy in it. Even your clothes. Everything has energy. We found out atomic energy. Dr. J. Lewis Guthrie, before the atomic bomb was ever invented, he was telling his students about atomic energy in his classes in the seminary. This was before it was ever done. Back in the teens, the 20s, and the 30s. He was talking about atomic power. When they set off the first atomic bomb, they didn't know whether it was going to blow up the whole world. Did you know that? If they got that chain reaction, they didn't know whether it was going to completely destroy the whole world or not. Period. But they took a chance. You know how many people have taken chances with your destiny? One of them today is what we're celebrating, Easter, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He was an interdimensional traveler. God, in John 1:14, it says, in John 1:1, it says, in the beginning kept on being the Word. And he kept on being an inseparable part of the Godhead because he kept on being God. John 1:14 says, and the Word, or the Jehovah flesh, he became. That's when God moved from one dimension into our little brain dimension. Brain, B-R-A-E, our brain dimensional in this three dimensions. Did Jesus, did he eat? Did he sleep? Did he touch people? And yet, many times, he traveled beyond his dimension, even when he was on earth. Could he steal the forces of nature? We can't do that, can we? Anybody ever been able to control the weather totally? You know, they were talking about this back in the 70s, and America was talking about this, and Russia says, well, now, in our next treaty, we're going to install in that treaty that we won't use weather warfare on each other. Weather warfare. All right. There was an understanding until a century ago, and when in 1905 Albert Einstein came up with a theory of special relativity, which has shown to be correct for very high accuracy. In special relativity, time is treated almost like another dimension, and time is another dimension, isn't it? One may perform a special type of rotation between space and time, which is called boost. Nothing can be accelerated to move faster than the speed of light. That's what we call a wall, except Jesus did. we see, that's one, that may be the 11th dimension. Also, energy E equals mass times the speed of light squared. In an elegant mathematical framework, time is related as another dimension, so we can consider space and time be the 4th dimension. We go from energy, that's light here, isn't it? Look up, see we have light? You just ate energy. Did you know that? How many of you ate something just a few minutes ago? Anybody here ate something? That's energy. Now you're going to convert that energy, that mass into energy is what you did. You ate fuel that will cause energy. Okay? Energy equals mass, an amount of matter. How many of you ate a great big piece of cake? You ought to have a lot of energy. Randall, did you get over and do that? Mass, amount of matter, which produces energy, equals mass times the speed of light squared. Now light. What is light? How fast does light travel? Basically 186,000 miles per second. Okay? That's just relative. It's actually different than that. But we square it off to that. Now, how many of you have heard the story about, now this is true, if you traveled in space and time 3.5 light years from the Earth, and you did that, and when you went there 3.5 years back at the speed of light, how much time would take place on Earth? About 300 years. In 3.5 years, about 300 years. Now what in the world happened to that? Now this is real. All of these theories have been worked out. How many of you have watched the time travel where they put you in this little capsule and this capsule spins and everything else? Do you know that if you could put yourself on a carousel and spin faster than the speed of light, your time would be basically standing still, and all the world around you would be going brrr, right along. People would be living and dying and being born and being married and all this kind of stuff. Trees would grow. Tall trees would grow just like as you're going on that. That's a different dimension. All right? That's a different dimension. Natural for scientists to unify quantum mechanics and Einstein's gravity. This turns out to be a very challenging problem. Many great minds, including Einstein himself, had tried over the years, 20 years ago actually. Much of this took place. Such a theory was finally discovered, namely the superstring theory, which ties all of this together. The theory is very deep after intensive effort for over 20 years by hundreds of physicists and mathematicians, and J. Louis Guthrie was one of them. I want you to tell you, that was my grandfather teacher. Almost all of his works are on the website, discoveryofthewordwithdrjim.com, because of that little fellow sitting right there. He copied it and pasted it on there. We have some idea of what the theory is telling us. To start out, the theory has 10 dimensions. 6 more. Now, space and time, that's the 4th dimension, isn't it? Now we've got 6 more dimensions. That's 10 dimensions at least. All right? Now we live in the brain, B-R-A-N-E, dimension. We're only what we can experience. But let me tell you something. When you were saved, you went into a different dimension. You did. You in yourself, in your entity, Spirit God came to dwell in you forever, and Spirit God came from another dimension, and yet He dwells in you. Okay? Now let's go to Revelation, the 4th chapter. And as you do that, look at your little thing here. This is New Jerusalem. All right? This is New Jerusalem. Now I'm going to, all of my notes are in this big book. Well, that was my Doctor of Bible Languages thesis. It starts out, of course, with meditate. Meditate means after these things. After these things I saw, and you behold, a door, having been opened up into heaven. We're going to go to a different dimension. We're going to be time travelers now. We're going to travel into a different dimension. A door having been opened up into heaven, and the phone, the voice the first, which I heard as a trumpet or a bugle, saying and speaking with me, come up here. Go beyond the dimension that you live in the brain dimension, and the 3 dimension. Let's go into a different dimension. All right? Now, he's going to travel through to space and time at least 2,000 years. Remember, if you were on a merry-go-round going at the speed of light, you'd watch this things come and go, and we'd watch oak trees grow slow. And they grow up, they would just be going like that. Just like it was just moments. How many of you ever seen time-lapse photography? Or you see this? This is what is going on now. John is caught up into heaven. Now, back in the Gospels, you remember that Jesus told Peter that you're going to die. You're going to basically die of crucifixion. Yeah! Peter, whoa. Yeah, I mean, whoa, what about him? Don't worry about him. It doesn't matter whether he lives until he sees me in my kingdom, which he did now. He actually saw him in the kingdom. Okay? And he says, come up here, and I shall, the word index is right in this word. It's index. And I shall point out to you the things it is bindingly necessary to become. Now, whatever translation you're reading from, this is from the Greek right here, okay? Whatever is going to become manifest, to spring into your sight. Now, the church, we've been talking about the church, and we've been talking about all the saved. We talk about the church age, the age of grace, as it's called here. When the rapture takes place, grace is taken away on this earth. Now, everybody after that's going to be saved by grace, but there's no more grace, no more mercy. We live in the age of mercy. What's going to happen on the earth right here is another dimension is going to be dumped out on the earth. Another dimension, a dimension of demons. We've studied about the angels, Michael, Lucifer, and Gabriel. And there were angels in Gabriel or in Michael's realm that were so powerful. Michael's realm is very powerful. And it's in the spiritual realm. There were some angels and spirits that fell in Michael's realm that were so dangerous. What did God do to them? He chained them up, put them in the bottomless pit to wait there, and they have been tearing at those chains, and they may not be literal chains, but they are boundaries. When you put a dog on a chain, you can't go any further. What God did is he put them in this deep sophon scotia, it says in Greek, deep darkness, where he put them, because they're children of darkness. The world is carried away with all these dark things today, isn't it? All kinds of dark things, evil things. Well, these evil ones, evil beings, are real, and they exist in this other dimension that we don't know about right now. But they're there. And God is going to open the door. He's going to open the door and turn them out on the world. And the world will not be a place of grace and mercy anymore. It's going to be a place of torment, terrible torment. And these beings are going to torture people horribly. Let's go over to verse number 2. Immediately I became. There's the word I became. What's it say in your translations? Immediately I was? Okay, but it's not was. Became means to change. In Genesis 1 and 2 it says, and the earth, we ha'aretz. Hathia tohu wavuhu. And the earth she became. She changed. God created her perfect, and then the earth changed. Now, John changes. Immediately, I changed. I became in spirit, in the spirit world, in the spirit dimension. Okay? In the spirit realm. John was translated interdimensional. And behold, a thronos. Now, actually, I'm going to tell you something about Greek here. The word where it says "and" right there, that's actually everything above that is in verse number 1. Verse number 1 didn't end until immediately I became in the spirit world. Okay, now it starts, verse number 2 starts at at "and." Kai in Greek. And behold, you behold. He's talking to us. You behold. A throne. It kept on setting in the heaven. All right? And upon the throne of one setting, and verse number 3, and the one setting similar to, in appearance, a stone of jasper. Now, look on your little charts here. See this little thing right here? This is a really in-depth lesson today, and I hope you catch some of it. If not, go back and listen to it again 10, 15, 20 times. Like my teachers used to tell me, if you don't get it today, stick it underneath your hat, and 20 years from now you'll understand this. And I did. That was very prophetic. Over here on the right, you have the Peter of the names of Peter, Andrew, James, all the apostles. Okay. Now the foundation of New Jerusalem, the foundation is the apostles and what else? The tribes of Israel. Over here on the left-hand side, you have the tribes of Israel, but you have them as stones. Each tribe of Israel, a stone represented that tribe. Okay? Now, where's that other little thing I gave out to you? With a little colored chart. And I probably don't even have one left in my hand here at all. There's the one. And I gave them all out. Anyway, here, in this chapter, you're going to see this revealed. This is the tabernacle right here. This is the tabernacle right here. It doesn't show you that here, but if you look at the tabernacle, and it's like this, you look over here, and over on this end was a calf, and the head of a man, and then we have an eagle, and then we have a lion over here. You understand that? Now, these four beasts, animals, chaya in Hebrew, living beings, okay, they represent different tribes of Israel. But they also represent the epiphany or the theophany or whatever you want to call it in the book of Ezekiel and the book of Revelation, which we're going to get into again here. And they represent the four Gospels because it looks at Jesus in a different aspect. The Gospel of John, as we're studying here, the same writer as the Gospel of John. Okay? Here you go. Oh, you got another one. All right. I'll keep this one up here. The Gospel of John looked at Jesus as what? As Jehovah in flesh. That's the eagle. The eagle that came down, the Wambly, the wing flapper that came down to earth. That's Lakota. Okay, the wing flapper that came down to earth. Basically, an eagle lives in the sky. That's where his abode is. That's where he spends most of his time. He comes to earth, but that's where he lives, that eagle. All right? And we're going to look at this in Revelation 4 and 3. The one sitting upon the throne is like an appearance of a stone of jasper. Now, jasper is what color? Anybody knows? It's kind of a light green. Okay, a light green. All right, a light green. And if you look from far enough away in most of the earth, the land mass in many places is green, isn't it? Okay. The stone, the lithos, green, and sardis. Sardis. What color is sardis? Sardis. That's flesh colored. Okay. And an iris. An iris. Iris is a rainbow. When we come to the rainbow, remember the covenant of God. The covenant-keeping God. Now let's go back here. What was Jacob, or Israel's oldest son. That's represented by Jasper, by the way. That's Reuben. Reuben means what in Hebrew? Reuben, see a son. Ru, see, ben, a son, according to the pattern. All right. Now the word Jasper there. What was the last son of Jacob? Benjamin. All right. So these represent Reuben and Benjamin. Now through the tribes of Israel, through Israel would come the kinsman redeemer, our Goel. Okay, our Goel. That's very important. The whole book of Ruth is about our Goel. Goel. That means our kinsman redeemer. So let's look at this. Through the tribes of Israel, that's what it's talking about here, through the 12 tribes of Israel, which tribe would bring forth the Messiah? The Lion of the tribe of Judah. All right? But all of them are represented him here. The cornelian, or the sardis, or the flesh-colored one was, that is our kinsman redeemer would become part of us. Do you understand that? Through Jacob, or through Israel, we would have a Messiah. That Messiah would come and he would redeem all the mankind that would be redeemed. And he will redeem the whole universe back together again. In all 10 dimensions, by the way, that we know of. In all the dimensions. The iris. How many of you know what an iris is? A part of the human body. What is it, brother? It's the iris in the eye. What part of the eye is the iris? The colored part. That's the iris. That word comes right out of Greek, iris, which means rainbow. That's the color part around your eye. You look in there and there's beautiful colors in your eye. You look into an animal's eye and there's beautiful colors in the iris, okay? But here, and it says, kuklothan, around about. The rainbow throne, it's like an iris. All around the throne, it's like your eye. It's circular. Around this throne are all these beautiful colors, and that's what God wants you to see is the colors, the beauty of it. Heaven is a beautiful place. Heaven is a beautiful place. Hell is a dark and dungy, dreary, dark place. In heaven you see all light. The word aletheia in Greek, that means truth. Aletheia, it means no shadows. All in the light. Okay? Around about the throne, like an appearance to an emerald. Like an appearance to an emerald. Gotta get my larger. I keep going off camera today. They're not going to forgive me out there in computer land.
That's okay, they're listening.
They're listening. All right, let's go on a little further. Each tribe remember, each representative tribe of Israel had a stone. Exodus 28, 17 through 21. Ezekiel 1 and 28, 26 through 28. And we're talking about the covenant-keeping God. All right, 4 and verse 4. Revelation 4 and verse 4. And Kluklothin, and around the throne, thrones. By the word, our word throne in English comes right from, it goes thronu and thronus here. It comes right out of Greek. Thrones. 24 thrones. And upon the thrones, the 24 elders. 24 elders. Now, who do these 24 elders represent? What do you think they represent?
Prophets?
Huh?
Prophets?
How many tribes were there?
12?
How many apostles were there? 12. All right. 12 and 12 makes what? You mathematicians? Anybody up that? Anyone gone that far in mathematics? 12 and 12 makes how many? 24. All right. 24 elders. Presbyteros is what it is. We get a word presbytery from that. When you ordain somebody, when they set you aside to be ordained, there's elders that go and lay hands on the deacons and the pastors and whatever and ordain you. The 24 elders sitting having been clothed. The word clothed there means to fling around. Wrappers. In Hebrew, the name for clothes is wrappers. They've been wrapped. They've been wrapped in garments, white. Leukois, white. Brilliant white. Brilliantly white. And upon the heads of them, crowns golden. All right? So now they have golden crowns. Now we have here all of the redeemed. All of the redeemed. All of the redeemed. All the redeemed of Israel in time past. And all of the redeemed in the church age. And that's what represent these 24 elders. The two ages are combined. Look up here for just a moment. These elders represent everybody from here to here. That's what we call Old Testament time. And they represent everybody from here to here. Past and the present tense that we live in today. Past and present tense. God has no problem looking through dimensions and time. We can look backwards real good, can't we? How many of you ever made a bad decision in your life? You could go back and you can look and well, I should have done this. I should have done this. You got real good hindsight. But boy, as we're going forward, but I'm going to tell you something. From the Bible, you can look ahead. You can look into different dimensions, and the dimensions are real. The dimensions are real. Now they have white garments. So all of these 24 elders represent those two spheres of people. Those that lived back then and those that lived here. Now, we have a resurrection when Christ rose. We're talking, this is Easter. We're talking about the Anastasia. Say Anastasia. Anastasia means the standing again. Now, when Jesus stood again, was there anybody else that proved that he stood again? Was there any other, by 2 or 3 witnesses, let everything be established? There were a whole bunch of Old Testament saints, and that's what these elders are representative, that got to stand again, didn't they? Now, some theologians say that everybody in the Old Testament period of time, since Christ had actually paid for their sins now, before it was a promise. It was a promise in space and time, even though Christ stood as a lamb slain from eternity past, but in space and time, in our brain dimension, say brain. In our brain dimension, Christ had to become flesh in our three-dimensional world. Not talking about space and time now. In our space and our time, Christ had to become flesh and die on the cross, just like Psalm 22 said in Isaiah 53 and many other places. Those 2 chapters in the Old Testament are basically about Christ dying on the cross of Calvary. Now, he did that. We can look backward. A lot of people in the world today say, well, Jesus was just a prophet. Jesus was just a good man. I'm going to tell you something. Jesus was Jehovah God that broke into space and time from his dimension into our dimension, became flesh, lived a perfect life, and he could do that. How could he live without sin? Because the law of sin in the Old Testament Hebrew says that the woman could not pass on the sin nature to the child. It was through the man. Any woman could have a child without the blood of the man in it. The blood of the man is what infects the child with the sin nature and sin. Jesus Christ didn't have the blood of man in him, did he? He had divine blood in him. He brought himself into the world. As John 1:14 says, as John 1:18 says, he brought himself in. He displayed himself in space and time in our brain dimension. Okay, in our brain dimension that we live in, our three-dimensional time. Let's go on a little bit further. Now they have golden crowns on their heads. Their church age is over. we're taking this two groups of people, and now we're up in heaven. We're up in heaven during a great festival, great festival gathering. And verse number 5 says, and out of the throne they came out for themselves, that's what it says here, lightnings. How many of you have ever had a real expensive, high quality diamond? Diamond. Yeah. What does diamonds do? They reflect light. How many of you ever seen that pistol I have of Audie Murphy's with those real pearl handles on it? When you take those things out into light, they will just knock your eyes out. What are the foundations of this temple? Pearl. The gates are pearls, that is. The gates are pearl. That will reflect all kinds of real pearls, solid pearls. Diamonds. Now let's look and see what the throne of God. And there came out for themselves lightnings. This is like the word asteroid. That's where our word asteroid comes from. And voices and thunders. Low bass tones. That's what that word, bronta. We got a word brontosaurus from that word right there in Greek. Brontai. Phone, voices, and thunders, low bass tones. Thunders, high tones and low tones. I'm really pretty deaf right now, but I won't be able to hear very well at this time. I feel more sound today than I hear. Lightnings and thunders and 7 lamps of fire. Guess what's in the... What is this right here? Do you see that? What is that? Huh? That is a lampstand. Okay? That's the lampstand. And how many lamps are on that? How many lamp bowls? 7. 7 is a number of what? Perfection. All right. And there came out lightnings and voices and thunders and 7 lamps of fire, caused to be continuously burning, down in the presence of the throne, and which they are the 7 spirits of the God. Now, what does 7 spirits of God represent? What's the 7 spirits of God represent? His omnipresence in all 10 dimensions. Did you know that? That God passes through all 10 dimensions that we know about. We can't go there today, in all reality. Though when you pray, you are interdimensional travelers. Did you know that? When you pray, where are you praying? Praying right into heaven, aren't you? Anybody prayed today? Yeah. You went beyond this dimension when you prayed. All right? The 7 lampstands represent, and the 7 spirits of God are the omnipresence of God, period. He's omnipresent. 7 is the number of completion, it's a number of perfection, and it's the number of completeness. 4 and verse 6. 4 and verse 6. And down in the very presence of the throne, and the throne is like a sea, a thalassa. A sea glassy and polished, like crystal. Now, this sea that is talking about here is the floor of the throne. You know what the floor of the throne is made out of? Solid diamond. It's solid diamond. And that diamond is going to reflect, it's the best diamond in the universe. The throne of God is sitting on one polished diamond. How would you like to have that on your wedding ring, girls? This solid polished diamond is reflecting all of the beauty and all of the colors of God. Down in the presence known as a sea of glass, a pure polished diamond. Flawless diamond. You know, when you buy a diamond, how many of you know what a flawless diamond is? Anybody even know? That's where you take a diamond under a certain amount of magnification. You test it, and it has to be flawless. Many diamonds that people have in your rings and everything else are what we call mine-cut diamonds. They're not flawless. They're diamonds. They're very hard. They have to meet the hardness of a diamond and everything else. But a flawless diamond is very, very expensive. This throne is a flawless diamond. And it's big. They think they found big diamonds, like the Hope Diamond and all that stuff. This one's bigger than anything that human have ever known. I'll tell you a little something else. You know, all the diamonds and all the emeralds and all the rubies and everything that are in this earth. They say God's earth, when he created it, it just had it scattered over just to make beauty in it. The Garden of Eden was God's jewelry case of all of those diamonds out there. And as they were trodden underfoot with sin and whatever, it's been scattered all over the world. And the earth was divided at different periods, during that period of time. We have the continents beginning. In the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. Glassy like a crystal. And in the middle of the throne, and around, Kuklo and around. You remember Mr. Kuklos out there at Lakeside School when he was principal out there? I went in there. I used to be a teacher out there. And I went into that, talking to him one time. He came into the classroom, and they wanted me to go down and get certified as a teacher and all that. And I went down there, and it was kind of a funny thing. I went down to the superintendent of schools, and they had me go through this 3 or 4 day course. And the first thing they did, they wanted to show us how hard it is for kids that don't know how to read and write, and they gave us this little booklet, and it had this orangutan on it. And down below it, it had printing, and the printing was not in English. And what we were supposed to do with units, we had to sit there and figure out what it said. And so we all had, there's like 30, 40 people in that classroom, and they said, you're over here in this unit, so I went over there, and some more over here, some more over here, some more over there. And they came over, and all of my people came with me, around me like that, and I said, this is a piece of cake. What do you mean it's a piece of cake? I said, I can just read that to you like English. How can you do that? It's Greek. It was English with Greek letters. It was easy, but they made mistakes. And I got up there and I started reading this thing, and they were all doing that, and the superintendent of school, come on, what are you doing? This takes hours, and you're done it in minutes. And I said, well, it's easy. I teach Greek. They said, get out of here, go, you're certified. Yep, go back. Anyway, I went back to Mr. Kuklos, and he said, I heard you got certified. Like this. I went in there. I said, you know what your name means? I said, your name means circle. Kuklos. That's the word right here. Kuklos, circle. Around the throne, 4 living beings. 4 living beings. Look at that word. 4 livings, being full of eyes. Here we have another theophany. What do you think this might mean? We had omnipresence before. What one do you think this 4 eyes? 4 filling eyes before and behind. Everywhere there's eyes on this being. What's it mean? Omniscient. He knows everything. He's all-knowing. The all-seeing eye. See that? All right. He's the all-seeing one. Verse number 7. And the living being, and this word here is where we get our word zoo from, is zoon. We get a word zoo. What is a zoo? What does a zoo have in it? Living creatures. Living creatures. What is the word for living being in Hebrew, Brother Roger? Chaya. Chaya. Say chaya. That's living beings. Chaya, living things. Everything that moves on this earth has life in it. And every animal has a soul in it. They are living souls. Every animal has a soul. Now, most theologians don't believe in that, but I believe the Bible, people. And the Bible tells me that all of these animals have souls. That's what it says in Hebrew. They're living souls. Living souls. Now, these living things, these living beings, the first like a lion, and the second living being like a calf, And the third living being like the face of a man. And the fourth living being like the eagle flying. Now what do you think this is? What do you think it represents? Jesus Christ in all of his different aspects in the four Gospels. Matthew looks upon Jesus as what? The King of Israel. He is legitimately the eligible to lead Israel as the King of Israel. How about Luke? Luke looks at Jesus as what? That was, by the way, the king was the lion. Okay? And Luke looks at Jesus as what? He looks at Jesus as man, as a human being. A human being. That's the face of the man. Okay? He was man. And when Luke wrote his gospel, and even in the book of Acts, he said, I was an eyewitness. And the word autopsy, when you investigate a person that has died under mysterious circumstances, they do an autopsy, they take him all apart, and they look in him with their eyes. It means to see for yourself what happened. That's what autopsy means. And he uses that, and he uses that because Jesus really did die on the cross. He didn't faint, he didn't swoon, he really died on the cross, and he was buried in the ground, and it says that he was buried in the ground, and it gave him a quick burial, and then they gave him an advanced burial. We know that. They stuck him in there, and they sealed it with a high priest ring, not Pontius Pilate's. No Roman guards there, but only temple guards. And then he did rise from the dead. The guards were all scared to death, everything. He rose from the dead. Like a lion, a living being, and a man, and the fourth living beast like an eagle flying. So we have, and of course the Gospel of Mark shows us his servant. He was a son of man, the servant God that came to redeem us. And of course John looks upon Jesus Christ as Jehovah, the God of heaven. 4 and verse 8 now. 4 and 8. And the four living beings, one by one of them having each wings, 6 around and 6 within. They're full of eyes, and they don't rest day or night, saying, Holy, 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 Lord the God, the Almighty. All right. Now, when Jesus Christ redeems us, he redeems us with all of those qualities. Doesn't he? He redeems us with the qualities that he had. We become righteous, don't we? Now, I'm a sinner, people. I've always been a sinner ever since I was born. And when I was saved and born again, I was still a sinner, but I was a saved sinner at that time. But when God looks at me, he looks at me with the righteousness of Jesus Christ painted on me. He doesn't see my sin through me. Now, every sin that I ever commit, I will pay for on this earth. Not later. Not later. It's all right now. When you're saved, and your soul, and you are your soul cannot sin. Your soul can't sin. Your soul is miserably mistreated by sin. When you sin, your soul suffers, doesn't it? Now, as we look in the book of in the Bible, God's book, there was a man in the Old Testament that was an ungodly rascal, but he was saved. What was the most ungodly, one of the most ungodly people that was saved, we have a record of in the Bible. His name means darkness, secret. Lot. Lot. His name in Hebrew is Laut, like louse. He was a terrible person. But he was saved, evidently, because it says in the New Testament that Lot vexed his what? His righteous soul. Now, your body can vex your righteous soul. Your mind can vex your righteous soul. But it cannot be changed from righteous because it's righteous, and that's how you're going to stand before God. Now, in all of these aspects, we are going to be transformed one of these days. just like God. We're going to be just like God. When God created man, He created him in His what?
Exact image.
In His exact image. It said in Genesis 1:26, He created in him. Now, I want to say this again, too. From the Hebrew, Brother Roger, did God create man from mud, dust? No. What did He create him from?
Materials of
The materials that were related to the earth. But man came directly from the hand of God, not secondary. I heard a guy preaching a sermon on the radio the other day, and a guy said, God took man from dirt. Oh, he's a secondary creation. Oh, he should have studied Hebrew. Man is the primary creation of God. Woman was secondary creation. She came from man. Okay? That's why she wasn't so responsible. But since man came right from the hand of God and right from the elements of God, earth come from the same elements because earth comes from God. All the stars come from God. All this, and man is related to all this because we come from the same elements. And God said that man was going to become dirt, dust, because he would sin. That was prophetic. Okay, simple as that. I wish they'd take a little Hebrew with these preachers and get their acts together so their sermons will be credible. Credible. Now, these creatures now are going to be created to lead out in the worship of God. Who was the one that led out in the worship of God a long time ago? According to Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14, who led out in the worship of God in eternity past? Who was it? Huh? Who was the one? Who was the specific angel that led out in the worship of God? He was a choir director. Hillel, Lucifer. Lucifer before he became Satan. Hillel. What does Hillel mean? Hillel. It means light. Lucifer means light. 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 The book of Luke. Luke's name is Lucifer. Did you know that? That's his name. Luke's name is Lucifer. Lucas or Lucifer, which means light. Enlightened one or light one. Okay? These four living beings, according to them, having each wings and round within and eyes all over the place. And then it says down here, holy, holy, holy. Hagios, hagios, hagios. Say that. Hagios, hagios, hagios. That's what it says. What does hagios mean? What does holy mean? Huh?
Not of this world.
Out of this world. When you're born again, you become a saint. You become holy. You're not of this world. Your soul is no longer part of this world. Your spirit is no longer part of this world. Just that ungodly body you're dwelling in. That house. That decrepit, festering, rotten flesh. That's it. And you young people, you're beautiful now, but you had your time. You know, God makes us pretty one time so we can catch somebody. And then we begin to deteriorate. Then we begin to deteriorate. Holy, holy, holy. Not of earth, not of earth, not of earth. Kyrios, the Lord, the God. Kyrios there in Hebrew, it's in Greek, Kyrios. That means Lord. What would that word be in Hebrew, Brother Roger? No. That's Tamar. That means Jehovah. That's what a modern Jew would call that. That's Adonai. But in Hebrew, it's Jehovah, which we cannot say. That's the word Hadabar, or the Jehovah. Jehovah the God, the Elohim. This is a pure Hebraism. By the way, this is pure Hebrew right here. John Wright is writing in pure Hebrew. He's using Greek, but you have to equivalent. You will not understand John's writings until you know Hebrew. I can guarantee you that much. The whole book of Revelation is written with Hebraisms, full of Hebraisms. The Lord, Jehovah, the Elohim, the Pantocratori. Now, what in the world is the Hebrew equivalent to that? El Shaddai. El Shaddai, as the book of James called. The book of James has that Hebraism in it also. And Paul uses that Hebraism. The Jehovah, the Elohim, the El Shaddai. What does El Shaddai mean? El Shaddai brings what? The all-nourishing one. Shad is a woman's breast. El Shaddai, the all-nourishing one. He is all-powerful, all right. How many of you will ever run into a mama bear with cubs? I guarantee you what, that gal is very powerful. How about a wild cow with babies? You're in trouble. My outlaw stepdaddy one time roped a wild cow that had a calf that had run off. She was wild. She was a wild cow, and we got her, and she had a calf. We had her out here out by Cottonwood Road and that one intersection out there on Castle Loma, Tony Saunders' place. They had just brought this wild cow in. She had this calf, and I mean, she took off with that calf. Busted through the fences and everything else and got out there in this pasture, and it had an electric fence around it, so she wasn't going past that. But she was out there in this alfalfa field, and we were watering the alfalfa field, and it was about that deep in water. Now, can you turn cows loose in the alfalfa field? You do, you're going to bloat on you and they're going to die. So my dad went out there, and he's dodging this cow because she's charging him. You know what he did? He roped that cow. And he threw the rope to me, and he said, "Don't you dare let loose of that cow and lead her back over there." And I went across the 20-acre alfalfa field leading that wild cow, and her charging at me every few minutes. But I got her charging back, and I wasn't about to turn loose of the thing because he would beat me to death. My hands were so rope burned, that cow would charge at me, and I'd dodge her. And I'm going to tell you what, cows don't close their eyes either. This is rough business. And that cow would charge me, and I'd dodge out of her way, and she'd just be charging so hard, and she'd hit the end of that rope, and I'd bounce off the ground, and that rope just spinning through my hands. It was nylon rope, too. My hands were solid rope burns. But I got her to the corral. That was one of the toughest jobs I ever did. That cow, wild cow. Let's go on a little further. God the Almighty, the one who kept on being, the one being. Now John 1:1 says, in beginning kept on being the Word. That's what he's talking about here. John's in the book of Revelation, going back to John 1:1. The one who kept on being, and the one being. Now, in another part of the book of Revelation is the one that kept on being in the past, the one who became, and the one who became dead, in another verse. But right now here it's looking at him in his eternal dimension, beyond our brain dimension. And the one who kept on being, and the one who is being, and the one coming. The one coming. Verse number 9. And whenever they shall give the living ones or beings glory and honor and praise to the one sitting upon the throne, when we get our redeemed body, we're going to be like that theophany. We're going to be really like Jesus. When we're born again, we become a little like Jesus. When God created man, he was created exactly like God's image. In his shadow-casting likeness, that means also spirit, in his spiritual likeness, in his physical likeness, and his blood-flowing likeness. It says all of that in Hebrew. Now man has become like his Creator. The one sitting upon the throne, to the living ones, unto the ages of the ages of the ages. They shall fall, the 24 elders, before the one sitting upon the throne, and they shall be worshiping the living one unto the ages of the ages of the ages. The word aeon, tonion. That's the most best description of eternity here. It just keeps on saying this. It uses this over and over again. Aes, tus, aionos, ton, aionon, and then it says aes, tus, aionos, ton, aionon. Again. In Hebrew, it's got another word that's olam. Olam. That means to trace something as far as you can trace it. All right? And Olam is beyond as far as you can trace it, because we can't understand that eternity right now, because we live in a brain dimension, in a three-dimensional world. But our salvation, the salvation that God gave us, free, that He devised, goes beyond this dimension. Beyond this dimension. And they shall cast out the crowns of them. Now this is all the saved. All of the Old Testament, Adam, through Malachi, and Paul and Peter and James and John, all of them are going to take their crowns off their heads, including you. You're going to have crowns, and you're going to throw them at the feet in the throne, saying, "Worthy you are," verse number 11, "the Lord, the Jehovah, the Elohim of us." Again, Hebraisms all over the place. "To receive the glory and the honor and the power, because you have created the things, everything. And through the spiritual activating force of you, they kept on being, and they were created." And they were created by your spiritual activating force. Why did God want to save mankind in the beginning? If you'd have been God, what would you have done when you got out there? You started out with Hylel, and he became Satan. And then you put Adam in the garden, and you put him all over everything in the world. By the way, Adam was over the universe. Right here, starting with Revelation, the 4th chapter, God is going to take the title deed back. God gave to Adam, your great-grandfather, the title deed of the whole universe. And in his hands was the title deed to the whole universe. And when he succumbed to the devices of Satan, he handled him the title deed. You know why you got all this problem today? Because what Adam did back then. But he was the first Adam, but we are related to the second Adam. The second Adam is the one that we're celebrating the resurrection. You know, the Jews on this day celebrate they did celebrate the Feast of First Fruits. But they don't do that anymore. It's too much like the resurrection. Because the Feast of First Fruits is when you celebrate when the fruits come from the ground, the resurrection of the wheat and the barley and all the things, all the seeds you put in the ground, that's the first fruits. That's the resurrection, the Anastasia. All right, now here's the little book, the little title deed. "And I saw upon the right hand, the one sitting upon the throne, a biblos, a little book, a scroll, having been written within and from behind on both sides, having been sealed with seals 7. And if you look on your other little chart that I handed out to you someplace, this one right here, we're just getting into this today, basically. If you've got this one right here, that one over there also, that one that Bill handed out, we have 7 seals. All right? These are the seals. We have seals, and we have 7 trumpets, and we have 7 vials. All right? He's talking about the seals. I know that this is very confusing to some of you, if you've never studied this at all. But you'll understand it better and better and better and better, and you'll be able to go teach it in your classes when you get all through with this. The book's been written on the front and the back, and there's 7 seals, and this is a title deed of the whole earth. When the earth goes back to God, God's taken possession of it. For God so loved the world that he did what? He gave his only begotten Son. God so loved what? The cosmos, the universe. Everything's going to be redeemed back, and this is a title deed of all of that. The title deed of it all. Do you have any questions? Any questions? No questions? Brother Mike.
Where in the Bible did it say that animals have souls and not spirits, right?
That's right.
Only souls.
In Genesis, the 1st chapter. And God created them, every living soul. It's nephesh. Nephesh. This is a word. All of those living beings are nephesh.
Say, animals got souls but not spirits.
The word nephesh, what?
Animals got souls but not spirits.
They're not eternal.
I don't know. We bypass that so much. We've looked over all of that so much, I don't know. Do animals have will? Do they have a will?
Yeah, they can be.
Everything God ever, yeah, they can be mean or they can be good. I don't know. Now, this is in a whole different dimension, okay? We don't even know anything about this dimension. But what were animals created for? To eat? Companions. They weren't created to eat. Not because of the sin of man, and after the ark landed, and animals were never afraid of mankind or afraid of each other until Noah released them off the ark, and then man began to sacrifice animals, and animals became afraid. You know what? A goat and a sheep, they were the animals that were sacrificed. You know, the people would just love the goats and sheep and everything else, and then one day cut the throats for sacrifice. The animals don't know that. They'll just love you, and they'll follow you right to the altar to cut their throats. That's the way they are. As a lamb led to the slaughter, Jesus Christ walked. And it uses animals for that also. There's a lot about that I don't know. One great preacher from England, I believe it was, preached about this one time. I've never heard anybody else except for J. Lewis Guthrie. He used to throw a little piece and bit of it every now and then. He'd throw a little bit in there about nephesh. If you study Hebrew, you're going to see that. The animals have nephesh souls, all right? And they have spirits. They have ruach. Have you ever seen the spirit leave an animal? And the soul leave it? Yeah, and it becomes dead flesh then. That's the way it is. All right. Anything else? We're going to study about a strong angel next week. We got up to to the 5th chapter. We're going to start with the 5th chapter next week. And I hope you don't mind me reading from this Greek because there's too much left out. Yes?
Back in the verse 5, I know you said the 7 lampstands are 7 spirits of God, but I know 7 is perfection, but...
7, a number of perfection, a number of completion and everything. And the lampstands basically is talking about the omnipresence of God.
So 7 spirits of God, what?
That's talking about the Holy Spirit. In other words, the Spirit of God is perfection, isn't it?
Right,
Is the Spirit of God every place?
right.
That's right. Now I talked about the omnipresence of God, all the eyes, and now we talk about the spirits that are everywhere. Okay, the 7 spirits, which that lampstand represent right there, the lampstand and the tabernacle.
But what is the 7? What is, because...
God is perfect, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's perfect. It means that God is everywhere. Perfect omniscience, perfect omnipotence, and perfect omnipresence.
I guess what I'm asking is why 7? Why not
7 is the number of perfection.
I know, but what makes that the number of perfection? What makes 7 the number of perfection?
Everything in the Bible, from Genesis through Revelation, the number 7. How many churches of Asia were there? How many churches of Asia were there? How many churches of Asia were there?
7.
No. Many. But how many did God pick out? 7. Many churches of Asia, but that brought his perfect story of the church age. All right? Does that help you just a little bit? All right. Anything else? Brother Randall.
I remember a Sunday school teacher wondering if God had 7 fingers on each hand.
He ain't got 7 wives, I can tell you that. He's smarter than that.
No, he's got one that
Yeah.
makes up a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
That's the bride. He had 2. One of them he divorced, didn't he? He got rid of one. She wasn't worthy.
Personally, I think the reason 7 is because it's 7. You got a Godhead. It would be 6 and 6 would be even. 3 and 3. But with 7,